Hello, and welcome to the Business Transformation Podcast with your host, Sean O'Neill. Today, we will be talking about business resiliency engineering. Wonderful topic that I very near and dear to my heart. Similar to last week's topic, we talked about healthcare AI. I recommend everyone check out that episode and let me know what you think. But today, we're going to be talking about resiliency. So, little bit of introduction. Sean O'Neill. I've been in healthcare IT for 28 years. Started many years ago at a little tiny company called United Healthcare, working on their help desk. And from that early days, I went on to start their crisis management center. I helped stand up command centers at Optum, and for literally my entire career, in one way or the other way, I've been focused on business resiliency, incident and problem management, performance tuning, tuning websites, tuning your back-end app, or tuning your vintage gas motorcycle. Also really good at that. they're very similar, actually. But getting your site, getting your app to scale, getting testing it with load testing, instrumentation and monitoring. These are all the type of things that we're going to be talking about in today's episode and for the next couple episodes, actually. And really resiliency culture. So how can you make a corporate culture that really drives high performance and resiliency? So this is going to be at least a 5-part series. We've got a lot of material to cover, and I want these to be digestible, 25, maybe 30-minute episodes. So we've broken out these topics for resiliency engineering. Today, we're going to first talk about an overview of the entire concept, and talk about vital business functions and fault domains. These first episode is going to be very focused on the business and technology teams working together. So I recommend both technology people and business people. This first 2 episodes actually are going to be very interesting to both of you. The second episode, we're going to be talking about telemetry. This is instrumentation and monitoring to really understand your business with a technology lens. And performance load testing, a great way to really see what your site is capable of and then work on it to take it to the next level. We'll talk on the third episode about developer best practices, which is how can we develop systems, develop applications that are highly performant and very resilient. The next episode, we'll also talk about, the fourth episode, we'll talk about architecting for resiliency, some of the things that you can do in your back-end systems from an engineering standpoint to really deal with the inevitable failures or issues that will always crop up. And then ultimately, how you can prioritize your backlog of improvements. And the last episode, we'll talk about monitoring and alerting. So first, an overview of our entire journey that we're going to be taking over the next 4 episodes. First and foremost, we need to solve the business technology chasm. If you've been in technology, you've felt it. And if you've been in the business side, you've also felt it. This disconnect between the business and technology. Well, when we're focusing on how to make a high performant, scalable applications and back-end systems, we've got to solve that first and foremost. We need to have a language that can pull together the technology and the business teams, allowing the technology teams to describe the functioning of their ecosystem, and in terms that the business that it matters to them, right? And so today we're going to actually be spending a lot of time on creating that shared vocabulary between product, engineering, and operations. Well, like all things in the business transformation arena, we've got people, process, technology, and culture. And the first and foremost for all four of these things, you have to prepare for the inevitable. Systems will fail. And in this day and age with cloud, where we're no longer locked into an old on-prem data center, those data centers used to have outages. So we all thought, gosh darn it, when we're in the big cloud in the sky, we'll never have a disaster. We're never going to have downtime. But that's just not the case. The cloud vendors also have problems, and they put the burden on you to architect your system to be able to be resilient in a cloud where you really can't count on it ever being there. But it's also the processes that you put together to be able to respond to failures when they do happen, and a culture that feels in their bones that failure is okay. Systems are going to go down, but we don't need to move into a culture of blaming either technology or the business. Things that I've heard in the past are, well, the business didn't specify well enough. And so we built what they told us to do. And if it didn't work, then that's their fault. Or conversely, from the business side, very easy to throw stones at the technology teams after an outage to say, well, why didn't you guys see this happen before it did? Why did our customer end up calling us and letting us know that our site was down instead of you guys working on it? So that culture really has to be built, and the inevitability that things are going to fail, there's going to be unforeseen, unknown unknowns in Rumsfeld's nomenclature. And so really creating a culture that allows for open dialogue and starts with the foundational belief that it's not if the site's going to go down, it's when is it going to go down. And so obviously this starts with deep visibility. And in this series, we'll be talking about instrumentation and monitoring a lot, because just like I said earlier, on the business side, the last thing you want to hear is your biggest and most important client calling you, the head of sales, and saying, why was your site down this morning? And you didn't even know that it was down. And so instrumentation and monitoring to be able to identify when there are issues and hopefully set them up in an early warning fashion so that when things start to come off the rails, your technical teams are responding immediately before things go really bad. And then from the engineering side of the house, in later episodes, we'll get really deep into architecture and things that you can do to be able to weather the storm of those inevitable outages in a way that nobody notices. And so ultimately the why are you listening to this website? Why am I talking about this? It's all about growing your business, transforming your business, right? As you start to grow and the demand starts to come in, you need to be able to deal with success, right? And so this series is all about putting your instrumentation in the right place, having the right vocabulary to be able to converse between the business side of the house and technology, and having the right corporate culture that really embraces the inevitable. Vital business functions. All right, we're going to dig first and foremost into this shared vocabulary that I was talking about in the introduction. This is a concept that I've seen work very, very well. And I've also seen situations where vital business functions are not well defined, that even the most heroic engineers or the most amazing instrumentation and monitoring still won't cut the mustard if you haven't taken the time to define your vital business functions. So, what is a vital business function? Or why? As Simon Sinek would say, let's start with why. Okay, it's super important that you lay a foundation of describing your business to create this common language between the technology teams and their business. And within business, that's also product and operations. We all need to talk about our site the same way. With a common language, you'll be able to say what matters the most. And this is really important. So as a technologist, I'll talk about my own experience, right? When I'm looking at a site that I've engineered and we were rolling it out, in my mind, I think that this feature is super important. And I can really see that this feature is probably super important and it's really cool. And I got to make sure that it never goes down because I just really like, what this thing does, right? But unless I've described that vital business function or that business function, is it vital? Does it actually have to be working all the time or is it a nice to have? I'm not aligning my goals as a technology organization with the goals of the business. There may be something inside our site that the business thinks is very vital that the technology team might not even know. And if I'm in the infrastructure side of the house, I might not have ever even seen the application run. And so it's super important that we create these vital business functions so that we can have goal alignment. And when I'm putting the instrumentation and monitoring, that I'm hitting all of the most important places. And when I say most important to the business. So what is a vital business function? You've heard me say it 50 times. Pretty easy. It's just a major step along your customer's journey. So let's think about a portal. And obviously in my career, I've run a lot of portals. What's the very first thing that you get inside a portal? It may be, oh, you need to create an account. There you go. Vital business function, create member account. What's the next one? Well, if I already have an account, I need to change my password. I need to unlock my account. Boom. Vital business function number 2. Account maintenance. In the realm of healthcare, we talk a lot about eligibility. So there's going to be an eligibility vital business function. Now, how many is the right number? Well, obviously, if you've got a really complex site, you're going to have more vital business functions. But from my experience, once you get above like 15, you're now like really hyper slicing it a little bit too much, and you're going to miss the forest for the trees. And obviously, on the other side, if I've only got 3, account maintenance, new account maintenance, and product lookup. Maybe I'm not thinking hard enough about all the different functions that my system provides. And maybe these types of functions are not even ones that are visible to a visitor. Maybe they're back-end functions that our operations teams really need to have running. And so once again, I'm going to really reiterate having the entire product, business, the sales team, the operations team, and the products team all together to talk about what are the 10 functions that are absolutely important to this site and making sure that everyone's voice are heard and everyone is listened to so that we can all agree on what those vital business functions may be. So capturing the member journey. As I had mentioned when I was defining what a vital business function is, I was using a visitor persona. And a persona is really important when we talk about things like human-centered design. The human-centered design, you say, what are my users? Who uses this site? And let's give them a name, Sally White. And then you immediately are thinking in the experience of that Sally White, what does she do when she comes and visits the site? And map out her entire journey, all the different ways that she can interact with that site to make sure that you've captured the member experience. Now, this is going to be really, really important to keep it in those member-centric terms. So, for example, I'll have a VBF that I keep talking to called new account creation. The business should easily be able to understand what new account creation is. While from a technology side, we have a directory, it's called Entra. If we were just left to our own devices, we would call it insert Entra ID, which would mean a lot to me or many other engineers, but would leave your business partner really scratching your head and saying, what? We have a vital business function called insert Entra. What is that? No, it's new account creation. Super important to use those business terms and especially the customer-centric terms that really reflect their journey as they use your site. So now, vital business functions can also be external third parties. In this modern day and age, there's hardly a portal that just stands all by itself. And I would imagine that your business portal has other partners that you rely on for that total member experience or that customer experience. And so when you're defining what your 10 to 15 vital business functions are, also think of other partner systems that are required. And you can say, well, the get Experian lookup, something that we use a lot in healthcare, we're doing identity proofing, is a call out to Experian to validate that you are who you say you are using that Experian service. And so from the business, we would call that like member validation. To the technology teams, we would know that it was a call out to Experian. But once again, that vital business function is member validation. So up until now, I've been really hammering home that your vital business functions should reflect your business perspective. Your business perspective of your operations team, your product team, your sales team. Well, at this point, let's bring the technology folks back in after we've defined our vital business functions in more or less of a vacuum and lay these vital business functions on top of the technology components that are underneath. And this is the first time that we can start pressure testing if we've gotten too granular or maybe not granular enough, in that sometimes you'll have a technology component that serves a number of different vital business functions. And if that one technology component going down takes out all those vital business functions, does it make a lot of sense to still have them? So for example, in the early days of the internet, I remember some of the first portals I ever worked on would have a single relational database that all account information was drawn from. So having a VBF for new account, update account, delete account, validate account, if all of these vital business functions are all going to be available or not based on one single technology component, it might not make a lot of sense to break them apart, because vital business functions for instrumentation and monitoring and alerting are really, really important at that component level. Because if you're monitoring, is that component working? These are the vital business functions that it represents. Nowadays, I said back in the old days, if you had your database would go down, no one can log into the site. Well, these days, a lot of times there's resiliency patterns, and we'll be talking about these in subsequent episodes, that can allow for maybe existing accounts will work, but you can't make new ones because behind the scenes, things are read only. Well, in that case, it does make sense to break out multiple different vital business functions, even though there's a single technology component behind there. If you have the possibility of those vital business functions, some of them working when other ones aren't, then that level of granularity is useful, and we'll see why. So once again, pressure testing them to evaluate your VBFs to make sure you don't have too many or too few. Once again, from my experience, somewhere around 15 is a Goldilocks number. But you can look at historical data and say, okay, let's look at all the outages that we've had for the site. Obviously, this doesn't work if it's a brand new site, but if you've got some data, you can say, what were the most common ways that it failed, and what were all the different business functions that were either available or not together, and you can start lumping those ones together if they all go up or down at the same time. And as I mentioned in the previous slide, check with the technology teams to say, what is the level of isolation? Can I have this one vital business function? Is it isolated enough from another one so that if this one were to go down, I would still have that first one working? And then ultimately, the biggest pressure test is, does this align with our business operations? So we've got a business operations team that thinks about eligibility, and we've got an eligibility feed that comes from a strategic partner, then having a vital business function for eligibility lookup probably makes a lot of sense. So once again, why? Why are we doing these vital business functions? We're doing these vital business functions so that we can set up our monitoring, but most importantly, so that we can have accurate reporting, right? And so as we've broken up our different vital business functions, and once again, I'm going to stick with the one that we keep going back to, the new account creation. So now that we have new account creation set as a vital business function, you can quantify performance impacts as a percentage of throughput. And this is really useful to say, okay, yesterday we had an outage, people were having problems logging into the site. Well, let's look at the data. Were nobody able to log in at all? Or could they log in, but because it was taking a long time, that less people were able to get through? Well, there you go. Historically, we had 10,000 people per minute that were logging in. Yesterday, during those 2 hours, we only had 5,000 that could log in. Then we had a 50% impact. Now we can have facts that can drive the conversation and prioritization about what is the business impact of only having half the people on the site that usually was there. And you can start making business decisions and prioritizations about what to do about it. Timeouts, another great example. We had a whole bunch of transactions that were going through, but 20% of them would time out after 3 minutes. Once again, we can quantify the business impact to that VBF and drive prioritization about what to do about it. And so there's a really good example right here at the bottom. As I've been, really harping on the VBF for account maintenance, sometimes a system, if you're putting some pretty decent resiliency patterns, and we'll be talking a lot about different resiliency patterns when we get to the engineering side of this, but it could be that your directory is only available read-only. We're working off a failover copy that's frozen. Well, existing users can log in. They might not even know that we are having an issue. But if someone tried to create a new account, they would fail. And hopefully you would give them a nice, user-friendly failure message that would say, please try again later, instead of just like error 500. But once again, this is the why. This is the why I'm starting this entire series talking about vital business functions, because you can encapsulate performance issues, you can capture and measure the impact of those issues, and think of them in business terms so that you can quantify what to do about it. Next topic, fault domains. And you'll see how this is a natural extension about what we were talking about earlier about vital business functions. So understanding fault domains. So fault domains, this is primarily a technology concept. Vital business function earlier is primarily a business construct. But when you look at your architecture, when the engineers look at all the major components, draw a circle around the components that typically fail or fail together and represent these single points of failure, where if that component's down, then all of these VBFs are going to be down. Or if that component's down, then the VBF that depends on it is 100% down. And so a great example, especially back in the old days, is database. Even in the year 2025, there's still databases out there. And so think about this database, this Postgres database. What are all the vital business functions that it supports? That is a fault domain, because if that database is having problems, all of these vital business functions will be impacted. Very, very important when you're talking about isolating cause from effect, right? So if you can think about all the single points of failure within your technology architecture, what are your message bus? We've got a database, we've got a directory, we've got a cache, and then each one of these components support these different vital business functions. You'll be able to see through your monitoring, because we monitor those business functions. If this business function is impacted, but this one isn't, if they have different fault domains, then you can see how they're isolated. And you can at least keep some of your business running while the other part of your business is impacted, and you can focus all of your efforts on service restoration of that component. So this becomes really, really useful. This becomes really useful when you are doing synthetic transactions for monitoring. So synthetic transactions, the robots. This has been around for decades, probably from the beginning of when I first got into this, back at the birth of the internet, was, well, if we hate it when our customers can't log into our site, and we hate it when they call us and tell us that they can't log in. So 25 years ago, we started recording little robots, and that robot would log into your website and log out, and do that every so often, maybe every minute, maybe every 5 minutes. So those synthetic transactions are like the heartbeat of your monitoring. Super duper important, even if you have all the best monitoring of your system, if you've got real end user monitoring. But what about the times when you don't have real end users on your site? Even if your site is open for business 24/7, there's probably hours like 2, 3 in the morning when you don't have a lot of people that are using it. That's when those synthetic transactions are super important to see, are you there? Are you there? Are you there? And if you're not there, let's wake somebody up, or even better, have an automated action kicked off to restore service. So when you have these synthetic transactions, think about your fault domains and make at least one synthetic transaction to hit each one of those domains. So for example, if I know that I have a fault domain called my messaging bus, and that messaging bus are where messages for users are sitting, I can have a synthetic transaction that's just going out there and maybe writing a new message and then checking it 30 seconds later. 30 seconds later, maybe making an update to it. 30 seconds later, make a new one. Because if that message bus starts to degrade in performance or is completely unavailable, that one synthetic transaction is going to fail. And it's my early warning system that something's going wrong. And a lot of times in technology, these systems don't just pull down fail. A lot of times they start to degrade and the throughput starts to decrease or the response time starts to increase. Many times those are the same thing. And so you've set a threshold for that synthetic transaction to tell you that your fault domain of the message servicing bus is started to degrade. Let's either get somebody out of bed, start looking at it, or once again, better yet, kick in whatever type of automated healing mechanism that you put in place. But the whole reason, the why behind fault domain isolation is to isolate what areas you have within your technology system so that you can identify at a very granular level when part of the system is starting to have a problem and prioritize people working on the right thing first. So let's bring it all together. Let's combining VBFs and fault domains for reporting. So once again, recap, VBFs, vital business function, is a concept that is rooted in how the business, product, and operations teams define your system. Also, how the users of your system, the customers, would define your system. Fault domains are the technology half of the same coin. So you're defining the fault domain of database, message bus, directory services, content cache, right? Marry all of those together to make reporting nirvana. But it'll be much more accurate than if you just focused on one or the other. Because if you put together what are your fault domains and what were the availability, throughput, and performance numbers for those fault domains, and merge that with the business side of the house, what was the availability and throughput of each one of your vital business functions, you can see the impact between both of them. Very important, once again, for quantifying the impact of technical issues and outages so that you can prioritize remediation. Because otherwise, if you don't have this, I always say if you're going to do something, what would it be like if you don't have it? If you don't have good fault domain and vital business function measurements, you're all too often just going to be working on maybe what's the easiest, what's the cheapest, or what bit you last. But by quantifying the impact of your outages, you can make sure that you're working on the right thing. So thank you for your time today. Once again, here is our agenda. We've got a 5-part series. And today, we focused on bridging the gap between the business and technology teams with a common language. That common language of vital business functions and fault domains, and how taking both of those two things together will allow both sides of the same coin of business and technology to communicate effectively, to measure your business performance, and then ultimately prioritize any improvements that of your system that can improve its throughput, resiliency, and performance. So thank you very much. We'll have another episode out next week, and talk to you then. Bye.